In a surprising move that seemingly can no longer be ignored, the two biggest stars of the BTS generation, Jungkook and Jimin, are gradually marking their territory beyond the shadow of the agency that made their names, HYBE. As both begin establishing individual positions in the global fashion world and show signals of partnerships with outside entities no longer fully rooted in the old agency structure, the public begins to ask, is this the start of a larger power shift in the K-pop industry? The fact that the two most popular BTS members appear in major campaigns separately, without direct HYBE branding, has sparked unease among industry observers. Some even call it a silent separation, a quiet process where creative control and brand direction are no longer entirely managed by the agency. Jungkook, with his new identity as a solo international icon, and Jimin, with an increasingly global fashion movement, are starting to shape their own ecosystems. But what astonishes the public is not just their presence, but HYBE's absence in the spotlight. This phenomenon cannot be separated from a larger context, the post-BTS as an active group era. Many initially believed HYBE would use its full power to keep each individual within a controlled ecosystem. Yet the opposite is happening. Jungkook's collaborations with international brands directly, with no symbol or sign of HYBE's involvement, strengthen the assumption that exclusive control is starting to shift. Jimin shows a similar pattern, with high visibility no longer relying on HYBE's corporate promotion, but on his own international network. A big question then arises, is HYBE losing control over its two biggest assets? Or is this a deliberate strategy masked in an artist independence narrative? Both possibilities leave room for wide speculation, but one thing is undeniable: the emergence of a power shift in the South Korean entertainment industry landscape. Furthermore, this movement has ignited heated debates among fans and analysts. Is artist independence a progress or a threat to the K-pop ecosystem's stability? In a system long built on strict agency control and centralized management, such patterns may signal a transition to a new era. No longer the agency as the power center, but the artist as the brand itself. They form alliances, build networks, and execute personal visions without corporate intervention. One of the biggest highlights comes from the increasingly visible separation between Jungkook and Jimin from other HYBE projects. When they appear in global campaigns like for Louis Vuitton or other luxury brands, there's no official branding from the agency. This is not just an aesthetic decision, but a visually loaded communication strategy. Even when fans look for HYBE's name in those projects, they don't find a dominant role as before. Some begin to wonder, is this just a temporary pause or a silent statement from the artists toward the old management structure? This shift not only impacts the industry's internal structure, but also raises concerns about the sustainability of big agencies like HYBE. If Jungkook and Jimin can build strong personal brands, attract global audiences, and generate massive engagement without direct agency involvement, then the narrative of dominant management roles becomes increasingly blurry. Is the old agency model, handling everything from schedules, contracts, to public image, still relevant in the digital era, where artists can directly connect with a global fanbase without intermediaries? Of course, this change doesn't occur in a vacuum. Fans quickly notice this pattern and form new narratives. Are Jungkook and Jimin quietly preparing their own brands? This question arises with reason. Many fans see recurring patterns in social media posts, public appearances, even symbolic gestures in interviews. More surprisingly, several international fashion industry accounts are starting to refer to them as freelance moguls or brand bosses, terms never publicly associated with BTS members before. HYBE's absence in those major moments seems like invisible proof that's hard to deny. In an entertainment world that's usually highly curated, the agency's absence stands out more than its presence. And that's what makes this article impossible to ignore. We may be witnessing a moment that marks a new direction in the careers of two of K-pop's biggest icons and simultaneously a test of HYBE's institutional power. For some observers, this is a win for the artist, the end of management monopolies, and the beginning of full personal career control. But for others, it's a dangerous sign of fragmentation that could fracture BTS's collective brand consistency. Whatever the interpretation, We are in the middle of a major transition, and the public has the right to ask, who's really steering Jungkook and Jimin's path now? Is this a sign that HYBE is loosening the reins to give space? Or are they slowly losing their grip on their own icons? In the name of industry transparency and public interest, these questions deserve ongoing scrutiny. Because of all we've seen so far, one thing is increasingly clear: power is no longer centralized. It is dispersed and perhaps already changing hands. Yet now arises a much deeper and unavoidable question. Does all of this truly reflect a behind-the-scenes reality of Korea's entertainment industry? Or are we trapped in a narrative intentionally constructed to shape public opinion? Does HYBE's absence in Jungkook and Jimin's major campaigns reflect a real power shift? Or is it part of a marketing strategy designed to create the illusion of independence? Today's digital society lives in a flood of information, where TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube are the main sources of opinion formation. Video clips, speculative posts, and viral comments easily create new understandings, even if not based on verified facts. How can we differentiate between an artist's silent strategy and assumptions formed by the public? Are we only seeing what we want to believe, while the truth remains buried behind mass interpretation? It's worth noting that until now, there's been no explicit statement or official documentation declaring that Jungkook and Jimin have fully broken away from HYBE's direction. Yet at the same time, the public is presented with various visual evidence and communication cues pointing toward artist independence, from direct brand collaborations, appearances at international events without agency emphasis, to artistic decisions that appear deeply personal. Are all of these coincidences? Or are they designed to provoke public curiosity through ambiguity? A skeptical attitude becomes crucial in viewing this phenomenon. We cannot immediately conclude that HYBE has lost control just because it's not visibly present. It's possible that power is now working in a new form, not frontal, but hidden within structures and contracts inaccessible to the public. In this context, is HYBE's absence a sign of weakness, or a form of more subtle power? It's also important to note that most of the narratives circulating about Jungkook and Jimin's silent separation or personal brands come from netizen interpretations and social media. Much of the viral content relies on visual angles and symbolic interpretation, without administrative evidence or direct confirmation from involved parties. Are we, as viewers and observers, too easily swept up by emotional and tempting narratives without questioning their validity? Or has today's public become more critical, used to reading between the lines in celebrity communication? We must also consider the possibility that the issue of HYBE losing control is part of an industry fabrication meant to create buzz. In a world increasingly driven by attention and digital interaction, controversy can be a highly valuable asset. The more people talk, whether true or not, the higher the market value of the narrative. So, are we part of a bigger game? Is public curiosity being commodified to maintain relevance and market power? This phenomenon also shows how the line between reality and narrative construction is becoming increasingly blurred. In an industry where image and perception hold nearly equal weight to actual achievements, it's very likely that the distance between artists and agency isn't a real split, but a strategic scenario. Could the differing directions between Jungkook, Jimin, and HYBE be a deliberate brand diversification, not separation but expansion? As the public, we face the challenge not just to consume information, but to examine it. We must ask, where does this information come from? Who spreads it? What is the motive behind the narrative being built? We must also realize that information from social media can be highly manipulative, with selective framing, edited video clips, or opinions disguised as facts. Therefore, we invite you, the critical viewers and readers, not to immediately trust every circulating report, including the narrative built in this article. Instead, let's make this an open discussion space. Do you see the same pattern?